You mentioned there's a deconfliction mechanism to try to avoid Israeli strikes on UN facilities in Gaza. Is there any kind of mechanism to ensure, because we've seen it documented, well documented in the past, that Hamas and other terror groups are not occupying those facilities at any given time? How does that work? Is there any alert between UN personnel on the ground?
We have made it perfectly clear that UN premises should obviously not be targeted, but should not be used as offensive cover, so to speak. And that message has been passed on over and over again. We're seeing it in the Palestinian camp in Lebanon, where we've called on the armed groups to leave the school.
Is there a procedure in place, though, to make sure that civilians...
It is not acceptable for UN premises to be used by armed groups to shelter weapons or to launch offensive.
Is there a procedure in place, though?
Yes, I mean, the messages are passed. We live there. Yeah.
Does the UN personnel on the ground say to those civilians, hey, this is not safe anymore because this is now occupied by militant forces? How does that work?
We asked the militant forces not to use the UN premises. We need to do whatever we can to keep those civilians who are seeking shelter in UN premises safe.
One last question for you. Especially during these conflicts, proportionality is often talked about. I know the Secretary General was upset at Israeli actions in Jenin a few months ago during counterterrorism operations there against Hamas militants. 800 dead, beheadings, rapes, kidnappings of children. What does the Secretary General deem as a proportionate response to this?
It's not for him to set a proportionate response. I think if you look at what the Secretary General just said, I think you'll find the answer to your question. Nabil. And then Sherwin.
I'm trying to read the SG's statement carefully. I don't see that he called for a ceasefire, right? Does he call for a ceasefire?
We want to see an end to this cycle of violence.
No, because in his statement he called on the Hamas and Jihad to stop their attacks and release the hostages immediately. Does he also call on Israel?
We would like to see an end to this cycle of violence.
And is the UN doing anything to mediate between the parties on the hostages now?
We are. I will just leave it to say that Mr. Venesland is in touch at the working level with a number of parties.
And on the political level, does the SG have a plan of action? I mean, obviously he's calling for a negotiated solution, but for the immediate situation, can you share with us if he has any plan of action, how to start the de-escalation?
We need to see the international community and those in the region who have influence over the parties to all speak with one voice, and that's the aim of the phone calls that he's making and that Tor Venesland is making.
And my last question, the SG has already planned a trip to the region. Is he still planning to go there?
As I said, if I have any travel to share with you, I will share it with you. Sherwin Bryce Pease, South African Broadcasting.
Steph, thanks so much. The Secretary General said in his remarks that the most recent violence does not come in a vacuum. So given the years-long absence of any confidence-building measures towards direct negotiations, the growing radicalization we are seeing on both sides, the changing of the geography on the ground, on what basis does he continue to argue for a two-state solution? Asked a different way, there's a narrative out there that a two-state solution is purely becoming a fantasy. Given the changes we are seeing on the ground, on what basis do you still argue for a two-state solution?
Because we feel, it's what is in the relevant resolutions passed by the member states of this organization, and the Secretary General continues to feel it is the only way forward. Now, we're also not blind. We understand that there are people creating facts on the ground, and every time those facts on the ground are changed, it pushes us in the wrong direction. It does not mean we will not stop pushing for the other direction.
Surely a policy changes if reality changes.
we adapt, but the goal, at this point, the goal for us is not changing. Stefano, and then Madame.
Thank you, Stefan. The Secretary General, when he started his mandate, he did several speeches, of which one in particular, the first speech on the Security Council, he said that prevention is not merely a priority, but the priority. He was talking about prevention of conflict. After we saw in Ukraine, and after we see in the Middle East now, does he think that this policy that he announced, and he was not only talking about himself, he was talking, of course, about the UN in general, also the Security Council, is a total failure now?
The Secretary General is not the person with the finger on the trigger. He and his envoys have continued to do whatever they can to do preventive diplomacy. In the end, leaders are acting in a way that leads us to a situation that we see.
But does he think that he did everything?
I think he feels he did everything that he could have. Evelyn and then Celia.
Thank you, Steph. Do the atrocities in Israel, is there a chance that they are going to overwhelm the atrocities in Ukraine as far as contributions and humanitarian aid?
That's not a question for me to answer. That's an analysis question. We think that we should pay attention to all these crises. But where how that attention is paid is often in the hands of the media. I mean, look at what I've read out today. I've read out about what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in Israel, what's going on in Ethiopia, what's going on in the Sea, what's going on in Somalia. We do our bit. Celia. I can't, I don't know. I don't know. Celia.
Talking about the DRC. Earlier, you said that armed groups in North Kivu are still fighting. The UN has been asked to leave the country. Would you say that the UN failed to stop the fighting in North Kivu?
It's a lot of UN failure questions today. I think, many of our colleagues, many peacekeepers have lost their lives in the Congo, doing their job, trying to protect civilians. UN peacekeeping is there to create a space through which, in which political leaders need to live up to their responsibilities. And I think in many places, those political leaders have not lived up to their responsibilities. And is that the fault of UN peacekeeping efforts? No, to paraphrase my answer to Deji. Alan, let's see if somebody can get me in a better mood.
That's right. I have a question regarding the Middle East Quartet. Are there any movements in this format, and does the ESG rely on this format in this particular?
There's been no. Let me put it this way: there's been no official movement that I'm aware of. The quartet is a useful mechanism that brings the international community together, but we are only 25% of that quartet, a mere slice. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Stefan. As you know, since last Thursday, Turkey has been bombing northeast Syria, and last night they killed 29 Kurdish internal security forces. Also, they targeted some agriculture workers, and they injured 5 women. I wonder if Secretary General had a chance to get in touch with Turkish officials recently, and plus, is UN going to send any help to build those infrastructure, civilian infrastructure in northeast Syria because of, for example, like power stations?
I need to check on the humanitarian aspect, northeast Syria. As far as I know, the Secretary General at his level has not been in touch, but we can check with Mr. Pedersen on that end. Okay. Round 2, Ibtisam.
Just a quick follow-up on the what Beno asked you about regarding the EU and them stopping or announcing that they will stop their aid. As you said, you didn't get an announcement when it comes to the UN, but I guess my question is, even if they will not stop the aid to the UN, they will stop it, it seems to be to NGOs, local NGOs. Do you consider this as being part of collective punishment?
I think those men, women, and children, and those people who often live in the most vulnerable conditions, who rely on humanitarian aid, who are the least responsible for the situation, should not pay a price.
Question about Syria and cross-border, because there is the two other cross-borders that they will expire in, I think, in a month. The Bab al-Salam and...
It's a lifetime.
Yeah. Any updates there?
I will check. I don't mean to minimize it, but I will check. Benno, then Pam.
Maybe I'd try a Security Council failure question then.
I will not. That's not for me to.
Well, does the SG have a comment or like a message to the Security Council? They met yesterday on the Middle East, and obviously there was no outcome. I think they didn't try to get an outcome, to have an outcome, but still, there must be maybe a message from the SG to the Council.
The SG's message, Security Council, is the same as it always has, is that a strong and unified Security Council helps all of us in our collective action to avoid further violence or to improve situation around the world. Pamela.
Thank you, Steph. You mentioned that the SG spoke with Sisi and Abbas and Herzog and Lebanon. I mean, he spoke with a lot of people.
I mentioned that he spoke to some and he will speak to others.
Yes. Can you give us some sense? I mean, I know there are readouts, but what are the world leaders in the region saying about,
Listen, I struggle enough. I struggle enough to speak on behalf of the Secretary General. I cannot speak on behalf of his interlocutors.
No, but what are they telling him?
Listen, you know how much the Secretary General prizes discretion, and how much I prize my job. So, Deji.
I'll have an easier question. Today, we discovered that the NYPD is actually strengthening security around the United Nations headquarters. Is that related to what the situation in Palestine is?
I think you need to ask them. We rely and are extremely grateful for what the NYPD does for us. I mean, we've seen, I think, over the weekend, there were counter demonstrations not far from here. So the NYPD does to keep whatever it needs to do to keep all of us safe. Stefano.
Yes, it's follow-up of what just Pam asked. Did the Secretary General intend to, did he speak or intend to speak with President Biden, and will he ask him to intervene in the situation about the sparing of civilians in this fighting?
The Secretary General's calls right now are focused to political leaders in the region. Edie, and then I'm definitely out of here and leaving you in Monica's hands.
On Afghanistan,
yeah.
Has the UN been able to get its people into this area of Herat, which is not so easy to get to?
We're trying to send an assessment team there. The transport and access are always a little challenging. We'll try to get, as soon as we have more info, I'll let you know. Monica, over to you.
Thank you so much, Steph. Good afternoon, everyone. I have 3 notes for you today. I know everybody's very busy. I saw you working hard yesterday, as I was also monitoring we were all monitoring the meeting in the Security Council. So let's get started. The President of the General Assembly, Mr. Dennis Francis, has asked for an immediate cessation of violence in Israel and Gaza after the attacks of 7th October against Israel. The PGA is appalled by the kidnapping of civilians and called for an immediate release of all people who were taken hostages. He urges all parties and key actors to exercise maximum restraint and engage in diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation and to protect civilians. He stresses that the international law must be fully respected. The attacks by Hamas on Saturday resulted in an escalation that left hundreds dead and scores more wounded in Israel, and the State of Palestine. The PJA joins the Secretary General in stating unequivocally that violence is not a viable path forward. It offers neither sustainable peace nor prosperity for any involved. This is a path that has proven to lead only to more bloodshed, more conflict, and more tragedy. In most cases, these are innocent citizens. We're talking about women, men, children who are paying the price. Mr. Francis calls for all parties to exercise maximum restraint and for all stakeholders to engage in diplomatic discussions, to de-escalate the situation, to protect civilians, and to chart a path to a two-state solution that offers peace, progress, and prosperity for all. You will remember that on Saturday, shortly after the assault by Hamas, Mr. Francis issued a statement on his account on the social media platform strongly condemning the attack. The J leader has called on the international community to stand with the Afghan people after the 6.3 magnitude earthquake in the Herat province on Saturday in Afghanistan. Media reports indicate that at least 2,000 people died in the disaster. Mr. Dennis Francis expressed his deepest condolences to the families of the victims and a speedy recovery to those injured. The President is deeply concerned about the impact of this devastating earthquake, which hit a region of the country that has already suffered from the consequences of conflict, drought, and food insecurity. The President expresses his solidarity with the people of Afghanistan and joins the calls to scale up emergency humanitarian assistance as aid workers are searching for survivors. He stresses that early action in situations like this is crucial to save lives and provide essential services for those affected. And tomorrow, for your diaries, 10th of October at 10 a.m., the General Assembly will hold the election for new members of the Human Rights Council. PJ Dennis Francis will chair the meeting in accordance with the rules of procedure of the General Assembly. States will cast their votes in a secret ballot. President Francis will then announce the results of the election. No statements from member states are expected. In order to be elected to the Council, each candidate must have at least 97 votes, which is the absolute majority of votes required. The 15 elected members will serve for a period of 3 years. We are talking here about 2024 to 2026. There are 4 vacant seats for the African region and 4 candidates: Burundi, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Malawi. The Asia-Pacific states have 4 seats and 4 candidates: China, Indonesia, Japan, and Kuwait. In the group of Eastern European states, there are 2 vacant seats and 3 candidates: Albania, Bulgaria, and the Russian Federation. On Latin American, Caribbean states, there are 3 vacant seats and 4 candidates: Brazil, Cuba, Dominican Republic, and Peru. The last group of Western European and other states has 2 seats and 2 candidates: France and Netherlands. So I think by the time we meet tomorrow, we may have a result for you. We'll see. And finally, on the PJ's agenda today, he received the permanent representative of Barbados, His Excellency Mr. Francois Jackman, before addressing the 5th committee, as you may know by now, and the 2nd committee in separate meetings. He also received the SG's personal envoy for Mozambique, Mr. Mirko Manzoni. As we speak, the PJ is receiving in his office the Ombudsman of the International Institute, Ms. Gabi Schwartz. Later today, he will take part in a video conference with the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. Late afternoon, Mr. Dennis Francis will hold a meeting with the USG for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix. My friends, this is all for today. Do you have anything? Edie, how are you?
Fine, thank you, Monica. Has any UN member state asked for a General Assembly meeting on Hamas's invasion of Israel and Israel's declaration of war against Hamas?
Nothing has come our way, but doesn't mean that it couldn't happen anytime. Thank you. Pam, how are you?
Hi.
Mm-hmm.
Good to see you here yesterday.
Good to see you too.
Thank you, Monica. the PGA statement was, as you said, very close to the Secretary General's in condemning the attacks, but he didn't use the word terror, calling it a terror attack, which the SG did. Is there, does he not believe it is, or is that just a different choice? Thank you.
No, I don't think that is the question. The PJ is appalled by this attack, and his reaction on Saturday, shortly after it happened, also translates his reaction to it. What I think right now, and we spoke this morning, because of course we meet every morning, and he also is stressing how concerned he is with the situation of the civilians, the people who were kidnapped, people who are being held against their will. And that's why in his statement he makes clear that all the hostages have to be released immediately.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Is he having conversations with regional world leaders about the issue, and who in particular?
The PJs.
Thank you.
Yeah, the PJs. I don't have any update for you on this right now, as it is an evolving topic right now, or situation. But the PJ has his office open to all who wants to speak to him. He's very concerned about this. He is asking for a cessation of hostilities, because we are having, as we speak, people being targeted. And it doesn't matter where they're from, people being targeted. We're talking about women, men, children, elderly people. So he would like to see an end of it, to this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone? Stefano, go ahead.
Thank you, Monica. Does the President of the General Assembly think that this crisis could have been prevented somehow, some way, if in the months prior or years prior something will have happened that didn't happen?
Yeah. Well, the president, I think you were here, right, when we had the press conference. The president has made clear his stance on when it comes to the Middle East. Yeah, that resolutions previously approved in this House, and we are talking about the Security Council, we're talking about the General Assembly, we're talking about other instances, are there to be abide by. People have to abide by these resolutions. That's what I would like to say. And he was very clear here when he said that he not only supports these resolutions, that they have to be implemented, but that his clear vision or opinion on this is that only a two-state solution that brings to peace, of two states living peacefully side by side, coexisting peacefully, is the way forward for the situation. However, right now, we are talking about an attack that just happened on Saturday, right? So I think we have two situations here, an evolving situation, a situation that has been there for decades and that have been dealt with in diplomatic ways when we're talking about the resolutions. But also we have a situation of an attack that happened on Saturday, an unprovoked, unexpected attack. And we all have seen the images on the media, traditional media, or social media. I think the PJ was very clear in his statement. There must be an immediate cessation of violence, and all sides need to find a path to a durable, peaceful solution. That's what we have to do. As we speak, we are still dealing with a very grave, terrible, serious situation of people being in terrible conditions, right? And I think right now what he's asking for is very clear. Stop all violence, and let's find a path to peace and to the end of the violence. Yes. Okay, anything else? not, I would say thank you so much for staying this late, and I see you tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you.